Good evening, everyone. The subject for tonight is an article that I sent, and the name of the article actually, well, it's Yud He Vav He. I'll just say Hashem is Elohim, not the ancestral spirits. And but that doesn't tell us a lot about what's in the article. And what I found interesting in the article, this is somewhat technical and historical, but it really speaks to burial death and burial practices in ancient times, which 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 I find interesting. Um, and and there's a couple of things you see in the Bible, which the text is gonna refer to, but it's also emblematic of the idea that we really don't know very much about what Judaism and how Jews practiced during temple times and biblical times. Um, it's fascinating to me that by and large Jews never wrote histories. You think of Jews as being so intoxicated with history, but the writing specifically of Jewish histories, as a subject, begins in the mid 1800s. There are some histories that are written during these times. Josephus writes a history of Jewish wars, and there's other writers, but we know very little about the day-to-day life of Jews or Israelites, however you want to call them, in biblical times and in temple times. We actually read an article that I found very interesting a while ago, which addressed the question, when did Jews really start becoming, I would say, obeying what we think of as mitzvot, the commandments of the Bible? So if you think about the commandments of the Bible, an obvious one would be don't eat pork. Okay, so kosher laws. Another obvious one would be mezuzahs on doorposts and tefillin, and those kinds of laws. And so again, without any histories, you would think that it's pretty difficult to get a handle on this. But we read an article a while ago from an archaeologist, who, of course, the archaeologists are excavating these cities in ancient Israel, and what they find is a lot of the cities which were known to be uh, Israelite cities, you would find pork bones and other animal bones, and they didn't seem to be worrying too much about keeping kosher. And it's around the time of the Maccabees, according to this article, that we start seeing a lot more attention. So we start seeing in Israelite cities, we don't find evidence of non-kosher food having been eaten. We find, indications of mezuzahs on doorposts. We find tefillin. And so it's just interesting because we have very little insight as to how Judaism was practiced in biblical times. Of course, we have the story of the Bible, but we don't know what people really did. We only have what the biblical account is. So this article is going to address some of those same subjects relating to burial practices and death, and and life after death, and um, and uh, and connecting it to our understanding of God, and what's the difference between Elohim and, I'll just say, Hashem, Yud He Vav He, which again I find it interesting. So I'm going to go to screen share. And I will introduce it. Joanne, are you interested in reading tonight?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'll just say Hashem. I like that because YHWH is the English for Yud He Vav He, God's actual name, and Elohim, I would say, is Hashem's job. And here they're sort of providing some evidence that the two are one and the same. So that's also interesting. So in
Wait,
ancient Judea, I'm going
no,
to read the. Go ahead.
all right, but no, so Hashem is Elohim, and you're saying that Elohim is Hashem's job?
Yeah, that's the way I think of it.
Okay.
Um, Elohim typically means God, small g. So you have all the other gods of ancient lands when they're mentioned in biblical texts, they are called uh, Elohim or El. Um, and they also may have a particular name, like Baal is a Babylonian god, and you have Ra, the Egyptian sun god, but they're called generally Elohim. And Yud-He Vav-He is understood to be the God of Israel. Um, and and again, the scholars get into a detailed discussion of this, and so we'll see what the article has to say. Um, okay, in ancient Judah, death was a two-step journey. The body was laid in a tomb, and the spirit passed to Sheol. Ancestral spirits were believed to influence the fortunes of the living and could be consulted, as when Saul summons Samuel through the woman of Endor, who exclaims, I see Elohim coming up from the earth. Biblical authors rejected these practices and replaced them, establishing communal ancestors entombed in the cave of Machpelah and asserting that Hashem Elohim alone can intervene to ensure fertility, land, and well-being. And it's by Professor Diana Edelman. And here's an image of the witch or the woman of Endor. People familiar with that? Um, well, I think we're going to read the text. So if it doesn't cover it, I can uh, maybe add a little more. I'm going to try. Okay. So, Joanne, would you like to read Biblical Death?
All right. Biblical death notices typically include both an idiomatic statement that the individual has been either gathered to or has lain down with his or her people or ancestors, and a burial announcement. For example, and Abraham reached his last, dying at a good ripe age, old and contented, and he was gathered to his kin. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried them in the cave of Machpelah.
Machpelah.
Then Machpelah. Then David lay down with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David.
So what they're talking about here, and I know the Hebrew is really small, but he was gathered to his kin. It's v'yasef, um, being gathered, and to lie down to shachav. So those are two sort of euphemisms, and we're going to see how the author addresses that.
The double description suggests that death was a two-part process. The spirit of the deceased was transitioned to join its forebears in Sheol, the realm of the dead, and the corpse was physically entombed. When the burial preceded the transitioning temporarily, the more important element was the successful settling of the spirit in Sheol to join other generations of ancestors, which is probably why it is mentioned first in the death notices. We do not know much about the rituals that accompanied each step, but the physical remains found in Iron Age Judahite tombs suggest some possibilities.
And generally speaking, um, you see this in tombs in Israel, where when you enter the tomb, there is a place which actually looks like a human form where the person is laid out. And I'm going to sneeze, excuse me. Yeah, I thought I was going to sneeze. Sneezes interrupt us. And then and then basically people would come back, typically after a year or so. I think this is discussed in the text, where the flesh has decomposed and probably been eaten by bugs and so on. So you have the skeletal remains of the person. And in the back of the tomb, there was something called an ossuary, uh, which is where the bones were just piled. And so at least one author talks about this idea of being gathered to your kin, and the that's the phrase here in Genesis. He was gathered to his kin. Um, you can take that philosophically that you're joining the spirits of your ancestors, but at least one author takes it literally that your bones are gathered with the bones of your parents, your grandparents, and other family members because there were family graves. And of course, it's pretty clear we find that in Israel. We find graves like that with lots of bones. Um, I think. Yeah, that's so I think we're down.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
rituals for
down here.
dealing with the dead.
Yes.
The burial preference in monarchic era Judah was for a family tomb hewn into soft limestone, which would contain the bones of multiple generations. In beach tombs, the
Bench
deceased would
tombs. Bench.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. In bench tombs, the deceased would be laid out to deflesh on one of two or three waist-high benches that lined the walls. When the bench was needed for a new corpse, the bones were mingled with those of earlier generations, either on the chamber floor or in bone depositories cut into the benches.
Let's stop for a
Grave,
second. Let's stop for a second. Um, Jim, and then there's one other thing I wanted to mention.
When I was in Israel, I saw uh, uh, the boxes were what do they call when you put a person in a box? That's the casket.
Yeah.
Caskets about this big, just big enough to hold the bones of people after they decomposed. Isn't that what they did? When did
You
they
saw them
stop
where?
throwing
I'm
bones
lost.
into
Okay.
piles?
Hold on a second. Stop for a second. You saw these caskets where?
Well, Jerusalem or
No, no, no. But in what context? You didn't see them lying in
oh,
the street.
I I remember seeing him behind some bars, but it was an
Yeah, I
example
was
of
there.
it was an
Yeah,
example
it's
of
outside Tel Aviv, not
I
about
think
20
I think
miles
it I
outside
think
of Tel Aviv.
yeah,
I
and I
was
think
there,
well, and I think
Jim.
it. Hold on a second. So I think in Meron there's one, and Erwin, are you talking about a particular person that people visited, like Maimonides, or just a regular graveyard?
No, no, you go what Jim described. I thought you go down a little bit, and there is a metal door there. It's like, and you look in. I didn't go in, but I was afraid to go in. But it was a barrier site for all
Yeah,
different
my
people.
sense is that that is much later than these times.
oh,
Alan,
I'm not sure you're referring to this, Jim, but when you go into any common current cemetery, probably also the Mount of Olives, but certainly all the cemeteries that I've visited in other places in Israel, the way the cemetery is organized are these cement boxes that the coffins get put into. They're not dug
Uh,
into the. This is not the biblical or ancient practice of dealing with the bones. It's the way in which
but,
Israel, but
no,
not digging.
but I think what Jim and Erwin are describing is like inside a cave-like structure,
yeah.
there are freestanding
Oh
what
yeah,
we would call caskets that I think are stone.
but those are not current practices, I guess. Correct.
Right.
The-
Well,
This,
I'll
the-
comment on
this,
current practices in a second.
these holes were was dug into the wall,
Right.
and yeah,
Right. And you may note that, I mean, some time ago, there was a casket that was found that I think people thought might have been James, Jesus' brother, or I can't remember who it was, but it was a freestanding um, stone casket. What it would look like what we would call think of as a casket, but it clearly was not made of wood because there was an inscription on it, and I think it later turned out to be a fraud. But the fact that it was, passed off as something meant that that would have been a practice.
hmm.
It in modern Israel, people are buried in the ground, and typically they are not buried in caskets at all. They are buried. There's a hole is dug, body is put into it, uh, a slab is put on top, so I think so it doesn't, so the ground doesn't collapse as the body decomposes. And in Morocco it was the same thing. When Sonia's mother died, I was at her funeral, and there was actually a casket that they used, that we carried her to the graveside, and it was a casket that's used over and over and over and over again, because once we got to the graveside, they took her body out, which was in a bag. You think of it as a body bag, a shroud, and it was put into the ground and covered, and that's the way the burial took place in Casablanca. Les.
Did I hear you say right that James was Jesus's brother?
Yes.
I didn't know Jesus had a brother. I thought he was the son of God.
Well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
My understanding, and I'll ask Jim to correct me, a
Yeah.
brother by a different mother. It wouldn't have been by Mary.
Yeah, that's what the
Half-brother.
tradition has. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joseph was his father of James?
I'm actually not certain, but probably yes.
From a previous
Jo-
wife, from a subsequent wife.
I don't know. My guess is subsequent, but I don't know.
Joseph could have been married first, had kids, the wife dies, he remarries. So Jesus has half brothers.
Right.
Yeah,
But the
and
question was, are they older or younger than him?
They would be younger, I guess.
okay, so I don't know if it would have been.
Yeah, they would have been younger.
Yes, because after all,
Oh,
uh,
no,
you know,
older. I'm sorry. Yeah, older.
yeah, okay, yeah,
Well, actually, I mean, at that time, men could have more than one wife. So
yes,
it doesn't necessarily even have to require that any of the wives
right,
stop
yes,
any of
not necessarily an issue, but yes, James is understood to be the brother of Jesus. Alan.
Reflect some homework I did in the last year about what's called green burial here in America, that it ends up being comparable to the Israeli practices, that the body is put in a shroud. There is no physical coffin. It is put into the ground though, and it in the conversations I've had with people, there is a Jewish green burial organization, and it's an interesting idea from a greener environmental standpoint. Although our tradition using decomposing pine boxes is not that much different, other than as opposed to metal coffins that never decompose, of course.
Yeah, so almost as an aside, in a Jewish burial, you are buried in the ground. That's or some contact with the ground. So the burials in what I call filing cabinets, I reflects my attitude toward them. But if you go and there are Jewish cemeteries here in Southern California where people are buried above ground, and that would not be kosher. Although my understanding is from Mount Sinai and Simi, they have them, but they're built into a hillside, so they actually have contact with the ground of the hillside, so they would be kosher. You're not supposed to use metal at all in a kosher casket because metal is an instrument of war. Um, and yeah, and I think there's some controversy. My guess is that what you're describing as a green burial, where it's almost like a composting, I don't think that would be considered kosher by Orthodox authorities, because
A,
because basically the body is being treated in a very different way than a traditional treatment of a body in Judaism. But it's not something I am particularly knowledgeable about.
a very rare exception is if the body is so highly radioactive that you need a lead coffin to keep people wandering through the cemetery from being killed, then the rule about saving a life taking priority would, I suppose, come
Yeah,
into play.
I've never heard of such a responsum, but it would make sense to me. Okay. Though the other comment I wanted to make was there was the mention of Sheol. And as you know, those of us that have looked at Jewish views of the afterlife, there's almost nothing in the Bible, as we will see, about the afterlife. But there is mention of something called Sheol, which seems to be a place where one goes when one dies. And you'll see the story of Samuel coming up from Sheol and to advise King Saul, and Samuel is not very happy about it. But it doesn't. The idea is not you should pardon the expression, fleshed out as being a place of punishment or reward or anything else. And I'm always struck by and I'm pretty sure it's true in the Hebrew also, that the root of the word Sheol is the same as the root of the word Sheolah, which means question. So it sort of indicates that this is a question. Okay, let's move on. Joanne?
Grave goods accompanied all burials, even the humblest of Iron Age tombs in Judah included an oil lamp and a chalice,
Chalice.
chalice.
Hmm.
Oh, see that? Usually it's not the CH, right? Usually it's,
Well, it's actually English here, so
I know.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Yeah, if you were looking for Hebrew, you would say uh chalice, yes,
All
but
right.
it's
So
yep,
chalice placed
yep.
beside the cadaver, suggesting a belief that the realm beyond life or the path to reach it was one where darkness and thirst prevailed.
So Iron
Additional
Age, my sense is like 600 BCE. So we're talking very early. And now we're gonna learn a little more.
But that's the period of the first temple, not
Yes.
that early.
It's not that
We,
early. Well, it depends what you mean by early. It's
well,
certainly yeah, okay. But that's why they're describing it, because it's biblical times.
So
Okay.
additional items typically included various vessels for the storage, preparation, and serving of food and beverage. The underlying purpose of the vessels is disputed, with scholars variously arguing that they were intended for use by the dead or by the living.
Right.
For the dead, the vessels may have held provisions for the spirit of the dead, either as it crossed over from the root to a new existence in Sheol, or for its continued life in Sheol. For the living, the vessels may have been used to prepare periodic meals shared with the dead.
Okay, so I want to just comment. Jim, you don't play poker, do you, Jim? Your reactions are so clear. So the
I don't play poker.
I'm sorry.
I don't play
Oh
poker.
yeah, don't start. Um, so this idea of crossing over, it's worth mentioning. The root is avar. So um, one of the words for sin is avera, which means you should be on the right path, but you crossed over the path away from the right path. So that's a word for sin is avera. You've heard the word ivri, namely Hebrew. Uh, the Hebrews are ivrim, same root, and often described as the people that passed through the Sea of Reeds and passed over the Jordan, and also people that pass over different cultural areas. So there's two possible thoughts here about why you find in these graves, what did they say they find? Um, food things. Um, one is like the Egyptians, that the idea that you're going to need it in Sheol. So you're giving them, a little something for the road. And the other one is it may well have been a custom to go back to the grave and have a meal there at the grave with with the corpse. And so you would find vessels that were the leftovers from that meal. Less.
I was going to kind of ask you about that. Hell provisions for the spirit of the dead. Now, was the spirit eating? I mean, I'm not. They felt the spirit of the dead would eat.
I would say the article says the purpose is disputed. So what we find is we find dishes and cups and things, and we're not sure whether the reason for them was the idea that the person who dies will need some things on their way to Sheol or in Sheol, or it's the remains of a picnic. Of course, we know with the Egyptian pharaohs, there was enormous amounts of things in the grave, chariots and servants who were alive at the time of the burial, to accompany Pharaoh across the river Styx, boats and things. So this may be sort of the same idea. And my understanding, I don't think this article goes into it, but that sort of stuff is absolutely not kosher in the Orthodox world of funerals. You don't have anything in a grave. Even you know, I mean, I officiated lots of funerals, and of course, it won't surprise you to learn that I'm pretty flexible on this stuff. People will put in, pictures of their grandchildren, um, be buried in clothing rather than just a burial shroud. Um, I've even, in some places where they will have uh, where they have cremains. Basically, someone's been cremated and there's an urn, and it's basically a wall, which is often transparent. So you see the urn in there, and then there may be pictures of the deceased. And I've seen golf balls and propellers and model airplanes and all kinds of things. So, but that is definitely not uh, kosher in modern day Orthodoxy. But it is interesting that we see it in these sort of ancient burials. Okay, let's read about tombside rituals.
Tombside rituals. Trita Isaiah condemns some sort of ritual taking place in or at tombs, euphemistically referred to as narat
No, it's
gardens.
actually ganot, gardens.
Denote, okay,
Yeah, it's very
um,
small.
which likely involved a series of actions believed to enable human contact or communion with the dead. A people who provoke me to my face continually, sacrificing in gardens and offering incense on bricks, who sit inside tombs and spend the night in secret places, who eat the flesh of pigs with broth of abominable things in their vessels. Although we no longer
Hold on
can
1 second. Hold on
clearly
1 second. Hold on. So I just want to comment. Trito Isaiah. There is a book of Isaiah, one of the books of the prophets, and it talks about historical times in Israel extending over quite a broad length of time. And scholars don't believe that this is the story of one guy named Isaiah. There may have been other prophets named Isaiah. And there are scholars that even divide it into three different Isaiahs. That's just a reference to what we're seeing there. And things that Isaiah is speaking out against, and one of the things he's speaking out against is sacrificing in gardens and offering incense. So this sort of idea of rituals that you would do at a at a place where people are buried, um, enabling human contact or communion with the dead. And I'll point out that in the Talmud, which now is 1,000 years after this Isaiah, there is a discussion of contact with the dead, and somebody wandering around in a cemetery and hears the dead talking about, uh, or they interview some of the dead folks saying, what's the crops going to be this year, so they know what the timing of the rains are, so they know when to plant and what not to plant. Because if you get your planting wrong, your crop won't do very well. So I know there's this discussion in the Talmud about specifically consulting the dead on issues that presumably they would know about, namely like when the rain is coming. Okay, so
Although we no longer can clearly understand the full import of the activities described, their condemnation indicates that belief in the power of ancestral spirits to influence the lives and fortunes of their living relatives was not limited to the Iron Age, but continued into Yehud in the early Persian period.
okay, so the Persian period presumably is post destruction of the temple and the early Second Temple period. And of course, you don't condemn things that aren't happening. It's one general rule of human nature. So if you find prophets condemning something, you can bet people are doing it. Um, and I would say in modern times, people go to graves of holy people. So just outside of the just outside of the old city, there is the tomb of King David, and you'll find lots of folks going to that tomb, although it's very clear that David is not buried there. There's a place very popular to visit, the tomb of Maimonides. There's also the tomb of Rachel in Bethlehem, and of course, the holiest place in Christendom would be where Jesus was buried. And in Morocco, people would visit what my wife would always describe in English as the graves of the saints. Although the word saint has a Christian connotation to our ears, I'm sure it's just the English translation of tzaddikim, the graves of beloved pious ancestors. So that is a modern Jewish practice. I know the Rebbe, Menachem Schneerson, the late Rebbe of Chabad. If you're ever in the cemetery where he's buried, and I was a few years ago, there are people there praying there all the time. So this idea of going to the graves of the saints, of the tzaddikim, as a way of asking that person to connect you with God, is very common today.
Becoming a family ancestor. In the final step in the burial process, some or all deceased adults were formally assigned the status of family ancestors. This process might have involved dedicating an object to represent the ancestor, possibly into which its spirit could temporarily enter, like a deity into a statue. This object would have been used in the household cult alongside objects representing the family's personal protective gods. The teraphim may have represented these family ancestors as suggested by their association with necromancy or consultation of the ancestors in Hosea's cult reforms.
So just a little pronunciation. Necromancy is the worship of dead folks. And Josiah's cultural reforms is around the book of Deuteronomy, around 700 or 800 BCE. We'll read just that reference to Second Kings, and then I will call on Alan and Les.
Josiah also did away with the ghosts and the familiar spirits, the teraphim and the fetishes, all the detestable things that were to be seen in the land of Judah and Jerusalem.
Now, with the book of Deuteronomy, Judaism changes pretty dramatically. It used to be you could build altars anywhere. In the book of Deuteronomy, it basically centralized worship in the temple in Jerusalem. So some people refer to the book of Deuteronomy and Josiah's reforms as the first Reformed Judaism, a dramatic change of Judaism. Alan and then Les.
I'm working with your definition of this word that people worship people who have died or just
Or
remember them.
connecting with people who have died, necromancy.
And so I like to think of the difference between the physical body and the soul. And I don't know if that's relevant to this idea. The soul
So what they're describing here, which is not something with which I'm familiar, is that you could build an object like a teraphim. I mean, there's mention of teraphim in the Bible. Other than here, I think Rachel hides her gods in her bed, and I can't remember who is looking for them. Maybe she's hiding it from her father, and she's claiming, that she's having her menstrual flow, so she can't get up from her bed. But it basically says that she was hiding the family gods there. So I get this idea, with which I'm not familiar, that the spirit of your father could enter a little statue that would then become sort of a cult object in your household.
I see. The other thing that reminded me one subject back, not the one you talking about, has to do with in the Fiddler on the Roof story. Tevye talks to his wife about contacting with the aunt or somebody to get advice on the marriage or whatever this issue was.
She has a
They're
dream.
seeking. Yeah, but it's
Tevye has a
about the,
dream.
yeah. Well, that's how it's described, but it feels like it's the same thing we're talking about.
Well, I
That
mean, that's a really interesting question. And when I have this discussion of deep Jewish, ideas in Fiddler on the Roof, it is clear in the context of that show that no one questions that Tevye's dream about his grandmother, I think it's his grandmother Tzeitel, for whom his daughter is named, or anyway, no one questions that is just a crazy dream. That it's really Tevye is really connecting with Grandma Tzeitel and his wife. Basically the idea of the dream is to convince his wife to to put off the marriage between Tzeitel and Laser Wolf so Tzeitel can marry Matel. And so apparently his wife is convinced by the fact that Grandma Tzeitel comes back to tell everyone, don't marry Laser Wolf, marry Matel. And whether the dreams are real or whatever is a different issue. But the interesting observation I have about that is no one questions whether the dream is just nuts. No one. His wife doesn't say, you ate something and it's not real. Don't worry about it. I mean, she is absolutely convinced that it's real, and I just find that very interesting. Les.
yeah.
Under becoming an ancestor, it sounds like they were not a monotheistic people at that time because it says along objects representing the family's personal protective gods. So
Right.
they had more. So it wasn't monotheistic at this time.
Yeah, so we've talked about this. That well, first of the sort of two questions: what's the theology, and then what is the actual practice? So we've talked about this, that in the early books of the Bible, it doesn't describe monotheism; it describes monolatry. That there are many gods that are recognized as gods, but our God is the top God and the boss of all the other gods. And we see lots of examples. The one with which everyone is familiar, most people are familiar, is the song Mi Chamocha. Mi Chamocha, we sing it actually in morning and evening services. Mi Chamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mi Chamocha ne'edar ba'kodesh, which means who is like you among the gods who are worshipped. So there are other gods that are worshipped, but our God is the top God. And if you really want to see a dramatic example of that, look at Psalm 82, where Adonai convenes a board meeting of all the gods and basically chews them out. Jim is going to check for me whether I'm actually talking about Psalm 82. I'm pretty sure that's it. He chews them out for not doing a good job. So yeah, and then the question is, even though there are prohibitions against worshiping these other gods, well, everybody had gods. So, so Jews had little idols in their possession also, even though strictly speaking, it may not be kosher.
Is that why in the first commandment is, I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other God before you but me?
You shall have no other gods literally in my face. And then it says, and it says, don't make any graven image of anything on the earth which is above or below, and don't worship them. So yeah, so I would say that commandment seems to pretty much restrict this. Now the question is, what were people actually doing? Which is this, question that I raised with regard to keeping kosher, but also right here. I mean, we're finding these teraphim
Well,
in Israelite
when
homes.
we are a monotheistic religion, aren't we? I mean, we don't believe in other gods. So when did that become
Prophets.
entrenched in Judaism?
Prophets, in the time of the prophets. So around Isaiah and other prophets, there's a switch from there are lots of gods, but our God is the top God,
Right.
to all the other gods are false gods and not real at all. And you find that
So it
heavily repeated
evolved. So,
in
so
the
it
prophets.
evolved through Judaism. That we said there were other gods because everybody else was worshiping them, but ours was the best. And then eventually we said, well, there are no other gods. It's just our God.
All the other gods are false gods.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. I think we're going to get to ghosts and spirits.
Okay, of a ghost spirit. The term Av may derive from the same root as Av,
It's probably
father.
Ove. I'm just commenting.
Ov, okay.
It's probably
Uh,
Ove.
all right. Father, thus referring specifically to an ancestral spirit. The various biblical references to an Av suggest that it was the spirit of a human being who had died and who could be consulted. For example, Saul finds a medium in Endor so that he can consult with the deceased prophet Samuel.
Hold on a second.
Uh,
So basically, what's going on here is Saul is very upset because Saul has had his own private prophet, Samuel, who even gets his own book. We have the book of Samuel. And Samuel is giving lots of advice to Saul about which wars to fight and how to fight them. And then Saul disobeys God by not wiping out man, woman, and child, I think among the Amalekites. And during this time, Samuel dies. And Saul is very upset because he's on the brink of another battle and he needs the God's advice, and Samuel is not there. So in spite of the fact that he has issued specific rules against consulting spirits, Saul is going to go to the woman or the witch of Endor and ask her to raise up Samuel from the dead. So that's the context of this story. Okay, so now let's read in 1 Samuel 28:8.
This comes from Torah.
I'm sorry?
This that you read now comes from Torah or from Talmud?
The book of Samuel?
Yes.
Bible.
The book of Samuel, Bible?
Bible, not Torah. So the Bible is 39 books. The first 5 are the Torah. Then we have a collection which are called the prophets. Then we have a collection which are called the writings. So that's all Hebrew Bible. And the book of Samuel is part of the Hebrew Bible. And I don't know what else to say. And then there's Talmud and everything else, which is after the Bible. Okay, glad you asked. It's good to keep track of these things. Okay.
Saul disguised himself. He put on different clothes and set out with 2 men. They came to the women by night, and he said, "Please divine for me by a ghost. Bring up for me the one I shall name to you."
Okay, so he asks Be'ov. So this is this term for ghosts of spirit. And let's keep going.
When she sees Samuel's spirit, she is afraid, but Saul presses on. The king answered her, "Don't be afraid. What do you see?" And the woman said to Saul, "I see a divinity being coming up from the earth."
Okay, so it's Elohim. There they have, well, here too, they put it in bold print. So again, I would say Elohim can mean God, small g. She's not saying that she's seeing, Hashem. She's saying she's seeing a God, a divinity being coming up from the earth. Yeah, so same thing. Let's continue.
When she sees Samuel's spirit, she is afraid. But wait, I read that already.
Hold on a second. I'm not sure where you are.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
Here, the Av is described as an Elohim, divinity. More on this later.
more,
Since
yeah,
it's
that's Ov.
okay.
Yeah.
Since the spirit existed in the spiritual divine continuum, it was thought to have access to knowledge belonging so that realm and could also intercede on behalf of its living relatives with more powerful entities. Saul thus explains to Samuel when he asks why Saul has disturbed him. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" Saul answered, "I am in great distress, for the Philistines are warring against me, and God has turned away from me and answers me no more, either by prophets or by dreams. So I have summoned you to tell me what I should do."
And I'm just noting here when he says God has turned away, he's using the term Elohim. So again, same word. We understand that Samuel was talking about the God of Israel, so the English has capitalized God there.
So, to communicate with the dead, a human could also be possessed by, i.e., have, and
Ov.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
I mean, there's no vowels in the Bible, but the fact that there's a vav there
Yeah.
distinguishes it from av. Av means father, and so ov seems to be connected with the word father, and they mentioned that before. Okay, Les.
So they're saying that you could talk to a medium and they could consult Samuel and bring him down? Or was Saul having an imagination and talking
No,
to
no, no.
this
The
medium?
biblical text. I mean, we could actually. I can't remember how much of this text they have. Well, why don't we take a quick look at it? Let me just Safari. Oh, whoops. Okay, so it's somebody remind me. It's Samuel. Whoops. What chapter and verse? Okay, let me look. 1 Samuel 28:13. 1 Samuel. Okay, so my question is, do you see, it's loading, do you see the text from Sfaria? Yes. Yep. Yes. Okay, good. So this is the story that they're referring to. I'm just gonna display it. Okay. So again, there's a war going on. 28:13. And Samuel had died, and everybody's mourning for him. And Saul had forbidden recourse to ghosts and familiar spirits. Yeah, for Shaul Hasir, which means to forbid, Ha'ovot. So same word ov. So Saul forbids consulting spirits, and then Saul is getting, frightened because of the power of the Philistine force, and he inquires of God. And here, actually, it's interesting. It's Hashem, Yud He Vav He. But God doesn't answer him either by dreams or by Urim, this kind of dice game that they might have had at the time. Let's see what they say. Kind of oracle, or by prophets. So Saul says to his courtiers, "Find me a woman who consults ghosts." Yep. And it's Ov again, and go and inquire through her. And his courtiers told him that there was a woman in Endor who consults ghosts. Okay, a almost related question for you, those of you with some gray hair in your head. You remember the TV show Bewitched?
Yes.
Anybody
Yes.
remember I can't remember what the witch's
Samantha.
name was.
Samantha.
Samantha. What was her mother's name?
Andor.
Sorry?
Andor.
Andorra. Yes. And this is where they're getting it from. The mother of the witch. And so he sets out, and this is what we just read. And he says, "Please divine with me by a ghost, bring it up for me, and I shall name it to you." And the woman says, "Did you hear what Saul, our king, has said? We're not allowed to do this. He's banned the use of ghosts and familiar spirits. Ovot for, oh, it's interesting. Familiar spirits is yid oni, from the word yodea, the entities that know from the land. So why are you laying a trap to me to get me killed?" She doesn't know that it's Saul, but she certainly knows that this is forbidden. And Saul says, "I promise you won't get into trouble." And he says, "Who should I bring up? Bring up Samuel." The woman recognized Samuel, and she shrieked. And she now realizes that this must be Saul, because everybody knows that Samuel was Saul's private prophet. And he said, don't be afraid. What do you see? And she says, I see a divine being, an Elohim. What does he look like? It's an old man coming up, and he's wrapped in a robe. And Saul knew it was Samuel. So this is kind of interesting for us students of what the afterlife is like. And if ghosts come back from the afterlife, at least in this case, it's an old man, and it's clothed, and no wings and feathers and things, but he's wearing a robe. And Saul Samuel's not happy. Why have you disturbed me? And he says, I really need some advice. And he says, why do you ask me, seeing that God has turned away from you and has become your adversary? I don't know what the adversary is, meaning of Hebrew uncertain. And basically, the ghost of Samuel tells him, you're going to lose your kingdom, and it's going to go to David. So, and you are also going to lose the battle tomorrow. And Saul's not too happy about this. And so the woman is very nervous, and she suggests that Saul has something to eat. It's kind of fun. But so they give him a Saul-fed calf and slaughtered him and flour and so on. Anyway, don't have to belabor that. But it is a story from the Bible, and I think it's almost the only story which literally tells of someone who has died, who then comes up and can interact, in this case, with Saul. So that's that's an interesting thing that us students of the Bible want to deal with. And even in the New Testament, I think they have Jesus going down and visiting Sheol, don't they, Jim? I think.
Oh, well, yeah, after he dies, he's gone 3 days. And where he goes, well, that'll depend on who you ask.
Okay, I thought it was actually even before his. Well, actually, I just plain don't know. So I'm not going to
Not
speculate.
before his death that I recall,
Okay.
though.
Okay. So okay, so then.
So Rabbi, is this validating then that we have ghosts?
I'm sorry.
Is this validating that we have ghosts then?
This is a story from the Bible,
Right. But
okay, which suggests that here is a biblical story where the ghost of Samuel comes up to talk to Saul. Now, if I don't, they call it an oath. So yeah, a ghost. So yes, what I would say is it's in the Bible. Is it real? God knows. I mean, I don't believe everything that's in the Bible. And of course, the ideas of the Jewish understanding of what happens after you die will develop greatly beyond what we have in the Bible. Because there's almost nothing in the Bible about reward and punishment in the afterlife, about resurrection, about reincarnation. The Bible is just completely silent about all of those things. But here is probably
it
the
makes a
only
loud
mention.
noise here saying that Samuel came back and spoke.
Yes.
Evidently, he spoke to Saul and they had a conversation.
Yes.
I mean,
and Balaam's ass has a conversation with him too. So do you think that Judaism teaches that there are talking asses?
now who's the other one that spoke to him? Who was?
Oh, Balaam. The story of this guy who was supposed to curse Israel, and he's going along the road, and an angel blocks the ass, and the ass starts talking with him. The serpent talks to Eve. Do you believe serpents talk?
You don't follow politics much if you have to ask whether there are talking asses.
I understand. But so the point is, it is a biblical story. If you believe that every element of the Bible is true and inerrant, then you have evidence for a Ov coming up from Sheol to talk to King Saul. I personally don't believe that, but it's up to you what you want to believe.
Paul
Okay.
is having a laugh fit over here. It's really funny. I wonder what
Oh,
you're thinking.
okay. Let me call on Erwin, and if Paul wants to share what he finds so hysterically funny about this. But first, Erwin, go ahead.
Yeah, we all read about in Ezekiel when all the bones become come out from the grave and
Yeah.
become
Yes, Ezekiel has a vision of dry bones
yeah,
assembling,
yeah,
and Judaism understands it to be allegorical about the resurrection of
yeah,
Israel, not about individual people.
yeah, all the
But yes,
bones. Yeah.
yes, yep. Paul, you wanna?
Yes, I'll just
Would you like to share with the class what you find so
I
funny,
will
young
just say
man?
I'll just tell you what I felt. Uh, I political in a political way, a talking ass, you know who it is, right? I just cracked up.
The question is,
No,
in a
I don't
political
know who
way,
it is. Who
who
is it?
isn't it? But
What?
that's another question.
No,
I'm
I
not
don't know
getting
who it is.
political.
Who is it? The
Oh,
man who
Our
saved
great
Israel and
president, our
caused
great
peace.
president. He's a talking
okay,
ass.
I don't want to get political because
I know
if
I
you
know he
that's
if
saved
what
you
Israel and brought
so
peace, so he's
hold
an
on, hold
ass.
on.
He brought it up. I mean, he's
Okay,
making.
okay, yeah. So yes, okay. So that's what you're laughing at. Thank you. Um,
Okay.
let's read one more little section, and then we'll pick this up again next time.
Yodei Oni, knowing familiar one, derived from the root Odei, to
No,
know,
Yoda, like,
Yoda,
yep.
to know.
Mhm.
Yodei Oni probably refers to a spirit guide or helper who is not necessarily a former ancestor of the person being consulted. Like the O of, it could take temporary control of a human body. Based on modern analogies, the spirit guide would have provided the specialist being consulted access to the spirit world. More generally, the guide could then contact a specific dead person in that realm.
So I would say what this story is contemplating is, and I'm going to stop sharing, is the idea of a medium, that there were people who could summon these spirits, um, and and that's why both the Torah and King Saul forbids it. Um, and there's a discussion in the Talmud about this kind of stuff also, because as the Talmud embraces the idea of, or let me put it this way, the rabbis embrace the idea of astrology, and we find astrological symbols in ancient synagogues. Um, but although as I've actually studied this, it says although the rabbis of the Talmud believe in it, the Hebrew word mazel means constellation of stars, as in astrological signs. Um, although the Talmud clearly uh, observes that these things are real, they say we're not supposed to consult them about what the future holds. We're supposed to talk to God, which is kind of an interesting nuance. So yeah, I hope you're finding this interesting. It's pretty technical, but I'm interested in it. Looks like we got partway through it, and so we'll pick up this again next Wednesday. And then I found a couple of interesting articles about the Garden of Eden. Since the sources that I use, Torah.com, goes with the Torah portion of the week, and now we're starting to read the Torah again. So the Torah portion of the week is Bereshit,
Right.
with the Garden of Eden. So we're starting to see some Eden stories. And I have a teaching which I've done several times. I don't think I've ever done it in one of these classes. I've looked at my list, and I have a class that I call Revisiting the Garden of Eden with a Jewish Tour Guide, and it's really fun. So I think I'm going to do that after we finish this article. Um, um, Farah, and then Jim.
Yes, when we dream that some of a dead person, we dream about that comes to us, talk with us, ask with us, what does it mean? It's the soul of that person comes.
Okay, so first of all, I don't know if you're asking a theological question or a psychological question, because if you ask, are you asking Moses or are you asking Freud? That's
I
that's one.
asking Moses.
Yeah. So so clearly the Bible talks a lot about dreams. Joseph has dreams. Um, when Moses dies, God says of him, when future prophets arise, I will not speak to them face to face like I speak to Moses, but they may appear as in a dream. And the rabbis of the Talmud say a dream is 1/60th of prophecy. And what they mean, they have a whole list of things that are 1/60th. So they say sleep is 1/60th of death. The Sabbath is 1/60th of the world redeemed, and sleep is and dreams are 1/60th of prophecy. And they use 60 because it was the Babylonian number system based on 60. So it's sort of their way of saying 1%. So apparently, what the rabbis of the Talmud were saying is that dreams have significance, um, and that connection is a real one. So I would say the rabbis are absolutely believers in the significance of dreams. Um, and a great example of that is again back to Fiddler on the Roof, when Tevye says he had a dream about his grandmother giving marriage advice for his daughter. They absolutely believe that dream was a real one. And I've talked to people, including my own wife, who have had appearances of people who have died in either in dreams or very realistic visions. And there's more to it than just a dream. I'll just mention this because it's so interesting. Sonia, when she was first married, with her husband, they wanted to work for a while and save up some money before they would have children. One of Sonia's, I think it's one of her aunts died. Aunt Anita died in Morocco. And sometime after she died, Sonia's living in New York. And she has this very powerful sense of Anita's presence in her bedroom. And it was at night, so it might have been a dream, but Sonia insists it was more real than a dream. She was terrified. And Sonia had this sense that Anita was looking for someone to have a baby so that Anita's soul could come back to Earth. Okay, Kabbalistic idea of reincarnation. Okay, so far so good. So Sonia, being very taken with this, writes a letter to her mother in Casablanca, Anita's sister, telling her mother about this experience. And at the same time, Anita appears to her mother and tells her mother, I went to Sonia, but there was no room for me. Okay, so this is sort of independent knowledge. These are the kinds of spiritual experiences that satisfy my scientific standards, which is to say, there's something you can't explain in any other way, and they happen to people I trust.
The mother had the dream before or after she got.
No. The mother. I think it was after this happened to Sonia, but the mother had the dream or the presence of her sister before she got the letter from Sonia.
Okay.
So there was no way that she could know that this happened to Sonia, but in Anita's appearance to Sonia's mother, Anita said she went to Sonia and there was no room for her. So the word went out in the family that the next baby girl that is born in the family has to be named Anita. Okay? Okay, Jim is jaw dropping again. Thank you, Jim. And in Israel, one of the family cousins or someone has a little girl. And of course, they are not going to name her Anita because Anita is not a Hebrew name. They actually name her Yael, which is a Hebrew name, but her middle name is Anat, which is another common Hebrew name. Okay? So far, so good. Fast forward to a time when Sonia is probably in her 50s or 60s, and she's attending a bar mitzvah in Paris. And coming to this bar mitzvah is Yael, part of the family. And Sonia and she meet up, and it's like they're connected. There's a very powerful bond. And of course, Sonia knows the story about Yael slash Anat, and said, what's your name, and or what's your middle name? She says Anat, and I think she said, do you know you were named Anita? And said, people told me that. And she said to her, do you know why you're named Anat or Anita? And the woman's never know. Nobody ever told her that she was named because of spirit visiting and going around the. So Sonia tells her, you were supposed to be my daughter, right? Because Anita first went to see Sonia to see if Sonia would have a baby. Turns out Sonia had two sons. So I don't know, they could have named something else. But they've had this relationship. I actually finally met her a year and a half ago at a wedding in Paris. But Sonia and this woman have a very powerful connection. So that is a very long-winded way of answering. I don't even know what the question was. Do we believe in these spirits and things like that? But it's a very powerful example that something's going on, because I can't explain it. Sometimes people like you say, Farah, that someone will have a dream. I dream about my father all the time. Is it really my father I'm seeing in the dream? Or do I miss him and I love him? I wear a pendant, a little Moses that was his. I wear it all the time. But when I dream about him, I don't have any scientific way of proving that he's actually contacting me. But in this case, something was going on between Sonia and her mother, and so I, consistent with being both a rabbi and a scientist, I have to keep an open mind on things like this.
Did they have any common memories when Sonia met this young lady, Anita? Was there anything common that they would have shared with the actual person? So that connection wasn't there.
Oh, but this was the soul.
No, I
presumably,
understand.
if the mystics would say it's the soul of her mother that went to see Sonia, and there was no room for Sonia, so she wound up being born into an Israeli family. Yeah, so there's no mention of, if you look in mom's upper left-hand drawer, you'll find,
No, I don't mean that when they first met, they had
no,
no common,
they just had a very powerful psychological connection.
but there was nothing with memories from the past, was there?
No.
Oh, okay,
No.
that would have really shocked you.
Yes. Yes. There is a story, there's a book called Does the Soul Survive? And it's by Rabbi Eli Spitz, another guy I trust. He's a conservative rabbi, lives in Southern California. And he tells the story. I think this happens to his wife, where she went to something and it was a medium, and the medium said something about grandma's ring should really be yours or something. And Ellie's wife had no idea. I have to reread the part of it in the book. Had no idea what this medium was talking about, but she went and talked to her sister, who was horrified and embarrassed because the mother actually left a ring, and it was supposed to go to Ellie's wife. Ellie's wife wasn't even aware of it, and the sister had it and never gave it to her.
I thought it was only Ashkenazi Jews that named children for deceased relatives, and that Sephardic Jews named their children for living relatives.
Both. I mean, Ashkenazi would never name anyone after a living relative. Deceased would do both. I mean, I'm sorry, Sephardim, I don't think are limited to living relatives, but it's very common. But how many relatives do you have? You only have one kid. Who are you going to name the child after? So in this case, they named her after Anita because the word had gone out. So again, the interesting thing is almost the psychology of it. The word went out in Sonia's family that Anita's soul is looking for a place to live and to be reborn into the world.
Wow.
And apparently, I don't know what individuals said, but apparently this idea was taken seriously and resulted in this baby getting the middle name Anat. So it is a belief, at least in her family, that this was a real thing. Alan.
And you can only be reborn as someone of your own gender?
No, God knows. I mean, there's discussions of being reborn as animals. There's sometimes, but yeah, I don't think it's limited to gender.
But Sonia didn't name any of her sons after this
No,
person.
no, her sons were born much later, and there was already a Nat in Israel.
Okay.
Alan, you wanted to say something?
No, I needed to leave, so I was just
Oh,
saying
okay.
thank you.
Yeah, I think we're done.
Me too.
Hey,
So have a
Rabbi?
good evening, everyone, and see you next time. Jim, you want to say?
Yeah, just Balaam's donkey. I bet I bet a class on Balaam's donkey would be interesting.
Yeah, I actually, I think it's Balak's. I don't know if it's Balaam. No, it's in Parshat Balak. Yeah, it is Balaam's donkey. Yeah, the
Anyway, just
midrashim about it would be
throwing it
interesting.
out there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Have a good
Thank
night,
you. Good
everyone.
night, everyone.
Good
Pray
Thank
for
you
the
so
peace
much.
of Israel. Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you.